Azsharan Mooncatcher for Paladin. 3 mana 4/2 mech with Divine Shield. And Battlecry, put a Sunken Mooncatcher on the bottom of your deck. The Sunken Mooncatcher is a 3 mana 4/2 mech with Divine Shield. And Battlecry, summon a copy of this. So I think of all the sinker cards, this is maybe the one that's the best up front. The front part of this is basically just Goody Two Shields. And Goody Two Shields was a good card, so this is probably a good card. Even if there's no mech paladin, any sort of paladin that just cares about having a solid play on turn 3 probably is interested in this card. But if you are playing mech paladin, then you're also going to have access to the radar detector and the seafloor savior, both to help you find the Sunken Mooncatcher. So of all these Sunken cards, that's probably going to be the easiest one to find, and the Sunken Mooncatcher itself is also one of the more powerful Sunken cards. So all around this just seems pretty darn good. The back half of it also has really good synergy with hand buff stuff. There's a little bit of hand buff stuff still in standard with Alliance Bannerman and the weapon, the Prismatic Jewel Kit, as well as the Sunken Savior, the Seafloor Savior. It will buff up the Sunken Mooncatcher when you dredge it up. So all around just seems like a pretty good card. Whether you dredge it or not, whether you're mech or not, just play it in Paladin and you're probably pretty happy, I would say. Next we have Azsharan Scavenger for Warlock. 3 mana 3/4 Murloc with Battlecry, put a Sunken Scavenger on the bottom of your deck. The Sunken Scavenger is a 3 mana 3/4 Murloc with Battlecry, give your other Murlocs +1/+1 wherever they are. So my first impression of this card is that I don't really like it. It's a 3 mana 3/4 up front, which seems pretty bad for a Murloc deck that generally is trying to snowball. Just playing a spider tank is like pretty ugly. And then the Sunken Scavenger, I mean, it is strong, but by the time it's like turn 5 and you're realistically playing this card, buffing stuff in your hand and deck at turn 5 is like pretty late, especially for a Murloc deck. And like also it buffs the board, of course, but that's not really much different from just playing Felfin Navigator, which has never been an incredible Murloc card. So, I don't know. I don't really like the front half of this card. I'm not in love with the back half of it. Obviously, you're supposed to play it with the Dredge Murloc, the Scent Finder, I think it's called, something like that. Blood Scent Vilefin. So you play this on 3, play the Dredge Murloc on 4, and then you can play this basically for 0 mana on turn 5. But it just still seems so slow. I don't know if it really fits what Murlocs want to be doing. But that seems to kind of be a theme for me with all the Murloc cards in this set. They all just seem kind of slow and not really in line with what I typically expect out of Murlocs. So maybe the Murlocs in this set just aren't playing the way that I'm expecting, and for that reason I'm underestimating all the cards, because they are plenty powerful. So if it's more like mid-range Murloc, then maybe things like this start making a little bit more sense, but I don't love this card at the moment. Next we have Azsharan Scroll for Shaman. 1 mana, discover a Fire, Frost, or Nature spell. Put a Sunken Scroll on the bottom of your deck. Sunken Scroll is 1 mana, add a Fire, Frost, and Nature spell from your class to your hand. This one I like. 1 mana, discover a card is like pretty reasonable. It always gives you Fire, Frost, or Nature, which is good with Multicaster, a card Shaman already wants to be playing. This is a good support for it. And of course the back end of it is incredible support for Multicaster. And there's also Coral Keeper that does the same sort of thing but summons instead of drawing. So this is just a really good card to support those. It's also just a good value card in general if you can dredge up the Sunken Scroll. And Shaman has one of the better dredge cards in the game with Scalding Geyser, 1 mana, deal 2 dredge, which is also a fire spell, which will probably be relevant in this deck. So, yeah, I mean, it just seems pretty solid for what Shaman wants to do. Maybe it ends up being too slow. I could see it just, like, not quite making the cut, but definitely a very reasonable consideration. Next, we have the Azsharan Saber for Hunter. 4 mana 3/3 Beast with Rush, and Death Rattle, put a Sunken Saber on the bottom of your deck. Sunken Saber is a 4-mana 3/3 beast with Rush, and Death Rattle, summon a beast from your deck. So the first thing to notice is that the front half of this card is awful. 4-mana 3/3 Rush is just a very bad card. You can kind of compare it to like Flanking Strike, I guess, a card that saw play in Hunter. But Flanking Strike gives you an entire extra 3/3 on top of the effect of Azsharan Saber. So it's pretty far below curve for the front half being vanilla statted. But the Sunken Saber is powerful. 3/3 Rush, again, sucks, but the Death Rattle of summoning a beast from your deck is really strong. There's some pretty powerful big beasts you can be pulling off of this. Probably most notable is going to be King Crush. Trade in your Rush minion and then pull out 8 face damage. Quite powerful. Something like Mountain Bear would also be really strong. I mean, even like if you're just pulling a Savannah High main, that's good. As far as neutrals, Humongous Owl is another good option. So you do have some good options. But by the time you're doing that, like you play Azsharan Saber on 4, Dredge it on 5, and then play Sunken Saber on 6 maybe, it's like you're barely even cheating out these cards. And as far as actually dredging it up, I don't think Hunter has a dredge card yet. At least not a good one. So it kind of feels like it just doesn't come down early enough. The front half really sucks. It's a lot of effort to get the effect out of this. You have to build around it. And like if you are building around this, maybe you just play Vandar instead. That's another way to get Humongous Owl out early. And probably just a better way to do it. Maybe you can play this in a more aggressive deck where you just go 2 Owl, King Crush, and then this. And you pull out damage pretty consistently. But it's still like really slow for a Face Hunter deck. Face Hunter's losing some of their early game stuff, although I'm sure it'll still exist in some form. I just don't like the card. Next we have Azsharan Trident for Warrior. This is a 3-mana 3/2 weapon. With Death Rattle, put a Sunken Trident on the bottom of your deck. The Sunken Trident is a 3-mana 3/2 weapon with after your hero attacks, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. So up front, this is Fiery War Axe. Fiery War Axe is a bad card, so not too excited so far. Then you dredge this up and you get another Fiery War Axe, but it also does 2 AoE, so 2 AoE plus 5 to a single target is like pretty good. Pretty good for sure. But you're playing the Azsharan Trident on 3, you have to swing with it on 3 and 4 to break it, and then you dredge it up, and the earliest you're playing the Sunken Trident is on turn 5. 2 damage AoE by turn 5 is not super exciting, although it is still decent. Again, just seems kind of slow. The front half is pretty bad. This also, it requires like so many weapon charges to really use this card, so it kind of interferes with like an Outrider's Axe, which is a card that slower warriors generally like to play. And it's not like, I haven't specifically looked at what's rotating, but it's not like Warrior generally struggles with finding AoE. So I don't think you're like desperate for a card like Sunken Trident. There's plenty of other ways you can clear a board. So I don't really love it. There are some ways that you can tutor this weapon, but Corsair Cash is rotating, so you're kind of stuck with like, where'd he go? He's 4 mana, Axe Berserker, which is kind of a sketchy card. You can also tutor it with Raid the Docks, but I think that's too slow for an aggressive Pirate Warrior. There is a bit of a push for a more control-oriented Raid the Docks deck. Maybe this could make sense in that deck. But again, I think I'd rather just play Outrider's Axe, so don't love this card. Next we have Azsharan Ritual for Priest. 4 mana, silence a minion and summon a copy of it. Put a Sunken Ritual on the bottom of your deck. Sunken Ritual says 4 mana, silence a minion, and summon 2 copies of it. So finally, we see the reason that Humongous Razor Leaf was added to the core set. Beautiful. 3 mana 4/8 curved into another 3 mana 4/8. So sick. But I think that's probably not really going to be a thing. Although if it is a thing, then you're probably pretty happy to play Azsharan Ritual. I think more likely this is a control card. Maybe something you would use to hopefully deal with something like Rattlegore. Rattlegore itself is rotating, but maybe something to help deal with a Rattlegore. deal with its Death Rattle and make a 9/9, pretty decent for 4 mana. But you don't exactly deal with the 9/9 from your opponent, so it's not great. But it is a reasonable answer to it, and you can just kind of play it sort of like a Faceless Manipulator, but I think generally when you're playing Faceless Manipulator, maybe you wouldn't want to silence the thing. I don't really know. It's a decent value card, and maybe if fatigue matters, you're pretty interested in just adding a Sunken thing to your deck just based on that. And the Sunken Ritual that you add into your deck is a pretty strong Faceless Manipulator. Just a good amount of value out of it. You get 2 bodies. But I think it's a very specific kind of priest deck that wants to play this. It's probably going to be somewhat meta-dependent as well, and you probably have to build around it as well, so I don't really know if all of those things are going to converge to make this card good. Next up, we have Wayward Sage for Demon Hunter. 2-mana 2/2 Naga with Outcast, reduce the cost of the left and rightmost cards in your hand by 1. So, in theory, you get some pretty sick discounts from this. But I think if you're a Demon Hunter that wants to discount things, you can just do that better with Final Showdown. So I don't think this card really has much of a home in a combo deck, unless it's a combo deck that somehow doesn't play the quest, which doesn't make too much sense to me, but could exist potentially. So maybe you just play this in more of like an aggro deck, just play it as a tempo card. In theory, it's kind of a 0-mana 2/2. But you do have to outcast it, and outcast can be kind of awkward sometimes. And if you're not immediately playing the things that you're discounting, then it's not really even a 0-mana 2/2, because you're getting delayed value out of the effect. And even if everything hits right, 0-mana 2/2 isn't even that strong. So, I don't know. I don't really love this card. I mean, it definitely does a powerful thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if it shows up in some sort of specific strategy. But it's just kind of hard to activate this, hard to make sure that you're getting the discounts where you want them. And I think it's just kind of low impact on its own. Next we have Emergency Maneuvers, a Hunter Secret. When a friendly minion dies, summon a copy of it. It's dormant for 1 turn. So basically your opponent kills it, it comes back to life, but it wakes up at the start of your next turn, so they don't get a chance to kill it. This is kind of a weird card, because the thing doesn't wake up immediately, so it's like not good with taunt, but it wakes up on your turn, so it also can't attack. So there's like a very specific set of cards that this is good with, otherwise the card just kind of doesn't really do anything. If you're not doing something specific with it, it's just like a worse copy of Pack Tactics, and Pack Tactics was never really great. So pretty unexciting with that in mind. But it does have some things it's good with. The most obvious is probably just going to be the rush mechanic, because you get the minion back on your turn and then you can trade with it. Maybe you can use it with like Stormpike Battle Ram or something. The dream, I guess, is use it with King Crush and just punch your opponent in the face. Maybe some other rush minions that it's like pretty decent with, but none of it really seems too exciting. I think the most interesting application of this card is with things that activate while they're in play. Maybe this is good with like Guild Trader in Spell Damage Hunter. Or maybe there's some sort of sick Baron Rivendare combo. I think probably the most powerful thing you can do with this is with Raj Najan, the new Naga legendary for Hunter that says after you cast a spell, deal damage equal to its cost to the enemy hero. So like turn 4, you just play Raj plus this secret. They take 2 damage, and then they kill Raj, and next turn you have 5 damage to put into your Raj. So that's like kind of powerful. But it just seems like everything this combos with is really specific, and you have to like set it up, and there's ways for your opponent to play around it. I don't know. I don't really love it, but maybe there's some sort of secret hunter deck that just needs more secrets. Pack Tactics is rotating. Open the Cages is rotating. So otherwise we only have 4 secrets. Maybe you just need a 5th secret, or would like to have the option for a 5th secret. But I think it's a bit of a sketchy card. Next we have Volcanomancy for Mage. 2-mana fire spell that says choose a minion. When it dies, deal 3 damage to all other minions. So 2-mana, 3 damage AoE is very good, but you do have to put a little bit more effort into this card. Maybe you have to target something and then shoot it with First Flame. So the minimum investment is like 2 cards and 3 mana for 3 damage AoE, which is still pretty good, but it's definitely not insane like a 2 mana deal 3 damage AoE would be. But I think the strength of this card is like your opponent is an aggro deck, they play a 2-drop, and then you slap a Volcanomancy on it and end your turn, and then your opponent just doesn't know what to do, because they don't want to play more minions, because when you trigger the Volcanomancy, all their minions are going to die. But they kind of have to play more minions if they want any shot at winning the game. So it just like puts them in a weird spot where they have to balance overcommitting versus undercommitting. And then if they undercommit and just play like 1 minion, then you could just first flame that minion instead and leave the bomb in play. So I think this card is really powerful against aggressive decks with that in mind. This definitely doesn't seem like a card you can play in something like Mech Mage or maybe even Naga Mage because it is a 2-sided board clear. So you definitely want to play this in a mage deck that can just kind of throw it on the board and not worry too much about it. But in those decks, I think this card seems very powerful. Next we have Wrathspine Enchanter, or Shaman. 7 mana 5/4 Naga with Battlecry. Cast a copy of a fire, frost, and nature spell in your hand. Targets chosen randomly. So Shaman definitely wants to be playing these kinds of spells because of multicaster and maybe the new card that summons things based on that. But I don't know if you're playing the 7 mana 5/4 to support it. It does cast copies of the card, so it's not wasting anything from your hand, which is nice. But the targets are chosen randomly. So if you're playing Shaman, your fire spells are probably like Perpetual Flame and the new Geyser card. Perpetual Flame can't whiff, but the Geyser can. If you're playing Frost spells, then Wind Chill can't whiff, but Frostbite can. And if you're shooting damage at your own minions, then this card ends up just being like really ugly. And then as far as nature spells go, again, like if you're shooting Lightning Bolt at your own minion, that's kind of ugly. And I think even Chain Lightning can hit your own minions. So you need to be playing like Lightning Storm, I guess. And at the moment, there's not even really anything big that you can do with this card. Because like Tidal Wave is rotating, Runic Carvings is rotating. You can play Glaciate, but then you have to put Glaciate in your deck, and it's like not even that sick anyway. Other than Glaciate, your next biggest thing is like Don't Stand in the Fire, which is fine, but not incredible. I don't know. I just don't like this card. I don't think we have the card pool to support it. I think a lot of times it can just whiff, and it's a 7 mana 5/4. I don't love it, even if you're playing a bunch of spells that support it. Next we have Naga's Pride for Hunter. 3 mana, summon 2 2/2 Lionfish. If you played a Naga while holding this, give them +1/+1. So if you haven't played a Naga, this is just landscaping. And landscaping, even with them being treants, has been a pretty bad card in Druid. So you really, really need to play the Naga. But the thing is, even if you do play the Naga, you get 2 3/3s for 3, which is like pretty good, but it's not insane. Hunter already has access to Petting Zoo, alongside a ton of secret support. And people just don't play Petting Zoo, because if you go secret into double 3/3, it's just not that powerful. So the low end of this card is just unplayable, and the high end of it is just like okay. And you have to invest into it by playing Nagas. So I just really don't like this card at all. I think it's one of the worst cards they've shown. Next up we have School Teacher. Neutral 4 mana 5/4 Naga with Battlecry. Add a 1/1 Nagaling to your hand. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less to teach it. I think this card is pretty good. 4 mana 5/4 Discover a spell is pretty good on its own. It's a Naga, so if you ever care about Nagas, you're definitely playing this card. And then you can teach the spell to a 1/1, which my understanding is that 1/1 costs 1 mana. So you're looking at just 3 mana spells costing 1 mana, basically. That's pretty good. There are definitely some situational spells you wouldn't want to play, but if you can pick up like a 1 mana counter spell that makes a 1/1, that's pretty damn strong. If you want to play, or if you end up picking up, you know, a quality for 1 mana that makes a 1/1, that's strong. Feral Spirit, that's strong. Even Dreaded Mount, which sees no play, is pretty strong if it's 1 mana and comes with a 1/1. So basically it's just kind of hard to really do that bad on the Battlecry with this card. And for that reason, I think it's probably pretty good. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to make the cut in decks that don't care about Nagas, but I think in a deck that does care about Nagas, this is one of the first Nagas you play. And maybe even just like a general like Control Priest type of deck would care about playing this card. Seems pretty good overall. And finally we have Abyssal Depths for Demon Hunter. 4 mana, draw your 2 lowest cost minions. Well, we know from Arcane Intellect that drawing 2 cards is only worth 3 mana. So for this to be 4 mana draw 2 cards, you need to be doing something specific with it. And when it says draw your lowest cost minions, it's kind of hard to really imagine what that specific thing is. Demon Hunter has some good lower cost minions, but not things that you want to invest 4 mana into picking up on turn 4. I think the best thing I've seen with this card is Vandar. You can play Abyssal Depths on 4 or even coin it out on turn 3. Always hit your Vandar, and then you can discount all your big demons and stuff. And Demon Hunter already has, like, sort of has big demon decks that would be interested in playing Vandar. Although at the moment, several of their big cards, Pit Commander, Ancient Voidhound, Priestess of Fury, are all set to rotate. So it kind of remains to be seen if that even still exists, and if this would be a good thing to do in that deck. But in theory, I could see it being powerful. Outside of Vandar, I think the strongest thing I can think of with this is with the new legendary Lady Steno, the one that says immune while attacking, and after you cast a spell, attack the lowest health enemy. So you could pick up Lady Steno pretty consistently with this card, but I don't know that that really seems worth it. And Demon Hunter in general is kind of a weird class for a tutor effect like this, because they have such good card draw with like Skull of Gul'dan and all their cheap stuff that they use in the quest decks. So definitely a very strange card. Hard for me to imagine it being too good for anything outside of Vandar. But there are more cards to be revealed that could potentially change my mind.